Hey, what's up everyone? Today, what I wanted to do is just make a real quick video on what you should be looking for if you're getting ready to purchase your first E38. But first, something I've been noticing in my videos, I'm getting a ton of views, but I'm getting very little interaction and subscribers. So if you could go ahead, do me a huge favor. If you like what you're seeing, just hit the like button, subscribe if you like the content. That would greatly be appreciated. Thank you. But when it comes to the E38 buyer guides that I've seen out on YouTube and across the web, is they're pretty long and dedicated, and they get into really the nitty gritty of a lot of stuff that I don't think is important. And I just wanted to make a quick video detailing the most important things that I think you should be looking for in any E38. So any trim, engine, so on and so forth. And if you've watched any of my other videos, you know that the E38 behind me is my personal 2001 740i M Sport. And after a year and a half of ownership, I have a pretty good idea of the things that I wish I maybe would have known a little bit more when I was in search of my E38, and I really hope I can help you guys out if you have the same questions as well. So the first thing that I'm going to get into, and it's probably the most well-known, is the timing chain and guides. Now going into the engine bay, you can see that there is not really a ton of room to work with inside the engine bay of an E38, especially in North America, where we only had the V8 and the V12 variants. So your timing chain and guide, all that's up in here, and you can see it's pretty well buried in there. And so if you need to have that done, it can be fairly expensive for the parts and especially for the labor to get that taken care of. Now, I really don't know too much about the V12 variant in the E38s. You'll have to do your own research on those. So the general rule of thumb on these is between every 50 and 75,000 miles that the guides will need to be done. And I think about every 100 to 150,000 the chain. A lot of times people end up doing them at the same time. So when you're looking for your E38, what I would say is this. It's probably a good idea if the one that you're buying has documentation that it's been done somewhat recently. Even if it hasn't, don't let that sway your decision, because essentially, if you own an E38 for more than 4 or 5 years, you're probably going to have to do it, whether it was done or not done. And it's an expensive thing to have done, but it just comes with E38 ownership. So don't let that deter you from purchasing an E38 because it's a relatively expensive thing. Doesn't matter. It's an E38, it's probably gonna have to be done at some point, just is what it is. However, what I would say is if you're purchasing a car that does not have the documentation on having that work done, definitely make sure it's reflected in the price, because you should not be paying top dollar for a car that could possibly need a $3,000 or $4,000 repair. Now, the second thing, while we're kind of poking around under the hood, is the cooling system. As this is a late 90s, early 2000s BMW, the cooling system is one of the weaknesses of this car. If you're into BMWs, you know that. If you're just learning about them, just know this. If it's any BMW from the mid-90s through the mid-2000s, just know the cooling system is going to have to be done on it. I mean, you can really see all the hoses in here are rubber. There's a lot of connections, a lot of vacuum lines, all that sorts of stuff. On these, they have these little connectors that actually pop on, and they can kind of be a real pain in the butt to get on. But these hoses can be expensive. So if you're looking to do a complete cooling refresh of just the hoses, you're probably talking $150 to $200 just for the hoses, and that's not even actual BMW hoses. So yeah, that's another thing on the E38 that can get kind of pricey if you're having to replace the entire cooling system, because there is just so much plastic on it. As I said before, if you know mid-90s to mid-2000s BMWs, this is just a case across every single one. It doesn't matter, and the E38 really is no different. And yeah, that's another thing. So if you don't have any documentation on a car that you're looking to buy, that it's been done, really get ready to set aside about $400 to $500 to buy all the parts to do it yourself. And if you're having a shop do it, think about twice that. You're probably going to be in right around $1,000 or maybe a little bit more to have your cooling system completely updated. Now, as we walk over here, item number 3 is going to be your window regulators. Once again, it's another thing that mid-90s to mid-2000s BMWs all suffer from. It doesn't matter if it's a 3 Series or a 7 Series. they all suffer from failing window regulators due to plastic parts and all that. So if you're looking at one and you see that the windows aren't working, it's probably the regulators. They can be kind of pricey to install. So once again, it's another thing. If they're not working, that's fine, but just make sure that that is reflected in the price of the car you're looking at. And truly, if you're looking at an E38, I would say at least half of them that are out in the marketplace currently are going to have at least one window that doesn't work. I mean, the one on here, 3 of my windows do not work, but it's not a major issue. I know what it is. It is what it is. So get ready to deal with that if you are looking for an E38. Now, let's move into the back seat. What do you think the issue that it could be that I'm going to talk about here? Right up in here, it is your rear deck speakers. There's 4 of them back there, and they blow, and they always are broken. It doesn't matter. So if they have not been replaced, you're gonna have to replace them. The foam in there is rotting out just from due to the age, and the speakers really weren't that great to begin with. So this is a completely involved process to get to this rear deck. You have to pull this entire rear seat out. You have to pull all this out. It's really a big pain, and the speakers themselves are pretty expensive. If you want to get some decent replacements, you're talking about $300 to $400 for any decent name brand. So just know this is a really involved process if you're going to do this yourself. If you have somebody do this, this could be, you know, $1,000 or $1,500 to have this done. Okay, and the 5th thing that we're going to talk about that's super common on these is the dash, and it's the lights and everything on there. Typically, when you're looking at them, there's pixels out of them and they're in pretty rough shape. And I'm lucky in this one. All the pixels are there. You can see right here for my temperature that light bulb is kind of starting to go out and you can barely read it. That's actually really good. Most of them that I've seen at least have some pixels burnt out. There's a lot that you can hardly even read anything on it. So just know when you're looking, that's probably going to be very common. Most you're going to see have that. So if you find one that's in this good a shape, that's a really, really good thing. But otherwise, if you see one where the pixels all are burnt out on it, it just is what it is. It comes with the territory. The cars are at least, 22 years old at this point. So super common. Don't worry about it. And while we're in the interior, one of the other things I'd like to talk about is all of your various interior trim pieces. You're going to see, like right here, that's broken. The clips on here are broken. This is not functioning. My glove box doesn't work. I actually had to glue it shut. And all of those things are super common. On a lot of the E38s, the glove box won't latch, or they do latch, but then they're dropping down. Plastic pieces are busted. The interiors are pretty torn up. On this one, you'll see that the headliner is all sagging because the glue has started to separate. Those are just things that you're going to find on E38s. And really, it's just like the things that I said on my E30 buyer's guide video, is the fact that these cars are starting to get really old. So it's not that they're cheaply made or there's anything. In fact, I think the interiors on the E38s, like the leather and a lot of those things, really hold up well. And it doesn't look too dated because it's not too electronic-y. I think it looks fantastic, but it's just the age of the items that are in here and a lot of the plastic items that break. And it just comes due to age. You can't help that. So what I would say is, if you find one that's really been well taken care of and somebody spent the time and the money to make sure that all the interior bits are clean and in working order, that's probably good. And most of the stuff you'll be fine. You can live without. It'll be fine if you're looking for just a driver's car. Another thing that I would like to touch on the engine is if you have the updated engine with the Vanos, those, if they start to fail, can be relatively expensive to replace. And on my car, there's a seal that's going out of it. And so it doesn't put tension against the guide, so it clicks a little bit when it starts up. So it doesn't affect anything. So yeah, if your Vanos is acting up on it, it can be relatively expensive. Even with a Dr. Vanos unit, to have somebody else do it, you have to pull a whole bunch of stuff off, and it can be rather an involved process. And really on these E38s, most everything else is just typical vintage car stuff with cars that are 21 plus years old. You have suspension issues that you're going to be running into, just general maintenance issues. There aren't the electrical gremlins that other older German cars have. The E38s are pretty good with that. And I would say like the drive shaft bearing, the center support bearing on those can go because it's still a two-piece drive shaft on here. But anything else really is not things that I would say are specific to the E38. It would be any vintage German car issues. But the E38 actually holds up pretty well, and they're fairly reliable. And even though it's not really a common issue, one thing that I'd like to bring up is the alternator on here. And on the later E38, some early ones, I don't remember where the cutoff is, those are liquid cooled alternators. So to replace them, the alternator itself is like $500. Once again, involved process to get it replaced. So if your alternator goes out and you're not willing to do the work yourself, you're looking along the lines of like $1,200 to $1,500 to have that replaced. So not that it's a major concern, but it's just something to know that you might have to deal with at some point in E38 ownership. Also, something I would like to talk about a little bit is the fact that a lot of people out there will say, you know, just buy an E38, they're super reliable. And I haven't really found that to be true. It's fine for what it is, but I wouldn't call it a super reliable car. This particular one I've had has had a lot of issues, and I've really taken a big hit in my pocketbook by having this car for the last year and a half. So what I would say is this, is if you want to do the work, if you have someone that owned it and did all the work beforehand, you have documentation, then that car is probably going to be pretty reliable for you. However, if you're looking to buy one on a budget that has no documentation, hasn't had a lot of work, it's probably going to be a pretty big headache, and you better be ready to write big checks to have the work done to it. All right, it's a couple days later. I was just coming out to finish this video, and clearly you can see behind me there's a lot of snow. And that just goes to show that you never know what kind of weather you're going to get in Wisconsin in the fall. One day it's going to be in the 50s or 60s and beautiful, and then, you know, a day or two later you're going to have a couple inches of snow. So that's why you don't move to Wisconsin. But really, I just wanted to finish up and give my final last couple thoughts on the subject of E38 ownership and the things that you should be aware of. Now, what I'm trying to say is, before, I was stating that, you know, like E38 ownership can be really expensive, and I don't want to scare anyone away from owning E38s or going out and thinking they're great cars, because they really are great cars. But I just want people to be aware that E38 ownership really can get expensive. I mean, I would say that maintenance-wise, you're almost talking about the cost of owning an actual M car. Maybe not a brand new one, but some of the more vintage M cars like an E46 or E92, along the lines of that. And so really what I'm trying to say is you need to prepare yourself and make sure the E38 is the car that you want to own. It's not the kind of car that you can own multiple cars with typically. You know, like my E30, I hardly ever have to do anything with it. The car will sit all winter. It starts up in spring. I just have to do basic maintenance to it. And the car's been great for near the decade that I've owned it. The E38 always needs something. And that's why I was saying, if you want to purchase an E38, my recommendation to you would be to find one with documentation that everything's been done on. You're going to pay a premium for such a car, but you're just going to get in it and enjoy it. And even if you do that, there's still going to be things that pop up that are relatively expensive. But you might enjoy your ownership of the E38 more if you go that route, rather than thinking you're going to buy one on a budget and then just do all the work to it, because it can add up. And I'll link down in the description of the video what my ownership of my E38's been like, and really kind of how expensive it can get, and what it looks like when you purchase an E38 that needs kind of a lot of work and is higher mileage. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't have done it. You know, the E38, especially the M Sport, has been a bucket list car for me for, you know, going on near 2 decades now. So I'm glad that I owned the car and I did the work and I really saw what it was about. But it's just getting time for me to move on. And that's another thing, is look out on the channel. I'm actually going to be talking about that because it really is time for me to move on from this car. So I'm going to talk about why, and then it's really to make room for one of my all-time dream cars. So look forward to that video. That's going to be coming out in the next week or two, where I talk about that. So I hope you were able to find the information in this video helpful. And if you have any questions, like I always say, drop some comments and I'll get back to you in a couple days, and I definitely don't mind helping. I think owning an E38 really can be a wonderful experience, and it is pretty cool. When you go to even a BMW meet, there's not really a lot of E38s, especially M Sports, and a lot of people really want to talk to you about it because it is one of those bucket list BMWs for a lot of people. It is one of the iconic BMWs of the early 2000s. And a lot of people would say it is on the Mount Rushmore of all-time BMWs. So as always, thank you for watching the video, and if you liked what you saw, make sure to like and subscribe. Peace.